Harumi Kazuhito is a high school student who lives alone in his small apartment in Tokyo. He is obsessed with a best-selling writer, Akiyama Shinobu, whose gender and identity are unknown. Kazuhito is a huge fan of her famous book series, The Deadly Sins, and is waiting for the highly anticipated last book of the series called Lust. One day, while sitting in a cafe, Kazuhito notices his wallet is missing, but before he can search for it, he sees a man with a gun threatening the cafe owner to hand over all the money. The robber turns his attention to Kazuhito and a female customer, demanding they stand up and raise their hands. Kazuhito stands up in fear, while the woman remains seated, writing something, which enrages the robber. The robber attempts to shoot the woman, but Kazuhito intervenes and is shot in her place. As Kazuhito is dying, he begins hallucinating, floating through a vivid, dreamlike scene. He sees a dog in a bubble, touches it, and is then pulled inside. Kazuhito wakes up in a pet shop, realizing he has been reincarnated as a dog. He struggles to adapt to this new existence since he can no longer enjoy his passion for reading. Kazuhito tries to ask the pet shop owner for a book, but all the owner hears are barks. A few days later, a woman walks into the pet store and asks to buy him. Kazuhito immediately recognizes her as the woman he saved at the cafe. When the owner refuses to sell Kazuhito, the woman cuts through the cage with a pair of scissors, scaring the shopkeeper, and takes Kazuhito home. She ties him up in a dark room and threatens his poor ass with scissors for no apparent reason. Kazuhito tries to talk to her, but she only hears barking, though she reveals she can understand his thoughts. The woman tells Kazuhito that he has been calling her name from the pet store for days. She introduces herself as Natsuno and repeatedly says she wants to kill him. Kazuhito then reflects on the cafe incident, trying to explain to Natsuno that he died saving her. Upon learning this, Natsuno feels guilty. She leaves the room without a word to take a shower, returning dressed in lingerie. She attempts to seduce Kazuhito, but he shows no interest, mocking her for her flat chest instead. Natsuno suddenly becomes kind, offering to let Kazuhito make himself at home, which confuses him. Though puzzled by her sudden shift, Kazuhito agrees, having nowhere else to go as a dog. Natsuno gives Kazuhito a tour of her house and reveals her extensive library, which excites him. Kazuhito notices that Natsuno lives in a lavishly furnished home. Natsuno then reveals she heard him calling her name repeatedly from the pet shop, disclosing that her pen name is Akiyama Shinobu. Kazuhito is shocked and has a fanboy moment, realizing that Natsuno is his favorite author. While living with Natsuno, Kazuhito notices her obsession with writing and realizes she excels at various things like cooking, cleaning, martial arts, and other sports. Natsuno explains that she picked up these skills to enhance her stories and make them more relatable to different readers. Later, Kazuhito watches a news report about his own murder, noting that the killer has yet to be caught. Kazuhito recognizes the news anchor reporting from outside his old apartment, Sumio Hall, and recalls room 101, where he kept his treasured book collection. He also remembers the wallet he lost the day he died. Natsuno overhears Kazuhito's thoughts and learns his address. She calls someone on the phone, instructing them to gather information about Kazuhito. The caller informs her that his apartment was number 102, not 101. The next day, Natsuno takes Kazuhito for a walk and they pass by the pet store owner with the afro. Kazuhito is happy to see him, but the man is intimidated by Natsuno's presence. As they continue walking, they encounter a flashy blonde girl surrounded by bodyguards, illuminated by spotlights to draw attention to her. The girl craves attention but feels insulted when Natsuno walks past without acknowledging her. Before the girl can confront Natsuno, a bodyguard drags her away. As they walk on, they pass by the Honda bookstore, one of Kazuhito's favorite places. Natsuno hears his thoughts and asks if he wants to go in, but Kazuhito declines. Eventually, Natsuno takes Kazuhito to his old apartment building, Sumio Hall. Kazuhito explains that a distant relative owned the building and allowed him to live in room 102 for free, in exchange for maintaining it as a storage space. Kazuhito had found room 101 empty and used it to secretly store his book collection, even though he officially lived in room 102. Natsuno unlocks room 102 with a key ring, explaining that her sister, a police officer, gave her access to all the rooms in Sumio Hall. Inside room 102, Natsuno explains to Kazuhito that she suspects the man who killed him found his wallet, which contained the key to room 101. Since no one is known to live in room 101, Natsuno thinks it's worth investigating both rooms. Suddenly, they hear a rattling noise and step outside to see Kazuhito's killer exiting room 101. The murderer starts fleeing as soon as he sees them, but Natsuno and Kazuhito chase after him. When they catch up on an overpass, the man attacks Natsuno. She notices he's holding one of the books from her The Deadly Sins series. After Natsuno gets back up, the killer pulls out another book from the same series, assuming a fighting stance, and declares he won't allow himself to be caught until he finishes reading the final book of the Deadly Sins. Kazuhito, hearing this, realizes that the man must have been hiding in room 101, reading Natsuno's books, which changed him. Suddenly, Natsuno charges the man, and the fight continues. Kazuhito notices that both Natsuno and the attacker are using the Nameless Fist, a fighting style Natsuno invented for her book series. Another book of hers describes a hypnotic move that the murderer then uses, revealing he's read all of Natsuno's works and is a fan of the author Akiyama Shinobu. During the fight, Natsuno employs a trick from her books, cutting open the man's pockets with skill, causing 2 more of her books to fall out. Distracted by his desperation to retrieve the books, the man leaves himself vulnerable, and Natsuno seizes all 6 books from him. She knocks him out with a powerful kick, leaving him dangling over the overpass railing. Natsuno suggests that Kazuhito push the murderer off the overpass, urging him to take revenge, saying that a dog pushing someone off wouldn't be considered sinful or wrong. However, Kazuhito surprises her by dragging the man to safety instead, expressing that he has no desire for revenge. He believes that killing the man won't turn him back into a human. Kazuhito also fears that seeking revenge might cause him to die too, and he can't allow that before reading the final book of the Deadly Sins. Despite his calm response, Natsuno remains frustrated and still wants to kill the man due to the guilt and stress she feels from Kazuhito's death, knowing he saved her at the cafe while she kept writing. Kazuhito reassures her, telling her it wasn't her fault. He protected her because it was what he wanted to do at that moment. Having read so much of her writing, Kazuhito understands her deeply and believes she would have done the same in his situation. Moved by his words, Natsuno begins to cry and abandons her intent to kill Kazuhito's murderer. Later that night, as they walk home, Natsuno admits to Kazuhito that she has strange feelings for him but struggles to express them. She also finds herself inspired to continue writing her next book. That night, Kazuhito dreams of his sister, Harumi Madoka, and the fierce Natsuno, but the dream takes a nightmarish turn. When he wakes up, he sees a strange woman sitting at the table with her head down. The woman begins acting oddly, naming gods and demonic characters from fiction, which scares Kazuhito. He soon realizes that the woman can also hear his thoughts and understand him. Suddenly, Natsuno enters the room, and Kazuhito feels relieved, thinking she will defend him from the strange woman. To his surprise, the 2 women begin conversing normally, and he learns that the strange woman is Suzuna Hayaragi, Natsuno's book editor. Suzuna tells Natsuno that she's in a slump and needs fresh inspiration. The conversation then takes a strange turn when Suzuna mocks Natsuno's flat chest, prompting Natsuno to threaten her with scissors, revealing herself as a masochist who enjoys being abused by Natsuno. As Suzuna leaves, she warns Natsuno to be cautious of a local criminal called Slasher, who has been attacking people in the area. Kazuhito asks Natsuno about her writing slump and learns that it started 3 months ago, around the time he was shot and came into her life. Natsuno blames Kazuhito for her slump and, as punishment, cuts him with her scissors. Not long after, Suzuna returns with news of the Slasher's recent attacks, noting that all the victims were stabbed while walking at night. Natsuno suggests Suzuna use herself as bait to lure the Slasher. Suzuna agrees and sets off to find the Slasher. Meanwhile, Natsuno decides to investigate the matter herself, despite her police officer sister advising her to stay out of it. As they walk the streets, they visit a bookstore where they meet Sakura, the owner's daughter, who works at the counter, and her little sister, Yo, who shows interest in Kazuhito. Natsuno asks Sakura about the Slasher and learns that a girl once defended herself by using one of Akiyama Shinobu's books as a weapon. After leaving the store, they encounter a man who tells them his colleague was assaulted by the Slasher after reading one of Akiyama Shinobu's books in a cafe. As they continue walking, a shining blonde woman appears, attempting to draw attention in various ways. Kazuhito learns that the self-obsessed blonde is Maxie Akazuki, a charismatic idol and best-selling author, who rivals Natsuno and another writer named Haim Haiji. Natsuno despises Maxie for constantly following her, while Maxie seeks to prove her superiority. To provoke Natsuno, Maxie taunts her about her flat chest and then flaunts her own figure. This enrages Natsuno, but before the confrontation escalates, Maxie's bodyguard intervenes and pulls her away, stopping her from causing any more trouble. As Kazuhito and Natsuno continue their investigation, They hear a commotion and find that the pet store owner has been attacked by the slasher, though he's unharmed. Natsuno scans the crowd and spots a suspicious figure, chasing after him as he tries to flee. Meanwhile, Kazuhito finds a book from the Deadly Sins series in an empty alley and tries to grab it but gets caught in a trap. He flashes back to a memory of his sister, Madoka, attempting to read Akiyama's book series to connect with his love for the books. Back in the present, Kazuhito awakens tied up in his old apartment and is shocked to see Madoka, who somehow recognizes him as her brother despite his form as a dog. Kazuhito recalls his human life and his deep fascination with books, while Madoka was popular and talented, except for her terrible cooking. He soon realizes that Madoka can hear his thoughts, giving him hope of returning to his family and escaping Natsuno. However, he quickly learns that Madoka is only pretending and cannot actually hear him. Before Kazuhito died, Madoka wanted him to move back to the countryside with their parents, but he refused, and now she feels guilty for not taking better care of him. Her desire to protect Kazuhito has twisted, turning her into an obsessed maniac. She expresses her wish for him to stay with her forever, which horrifies Kazuhito. She even tries to feed him some extra spicy chili curry, but he manages to dodge the spoon. When Madoka steps away to get pickles for the curry, Natsuno arrives and rescues Kazuhito, taking him home. Natsuno desires revenge on Madoka for kidnapping Kazuhito, but he explains that Madoka is his sister. Natsuno, embarrassed at the thought of Madoka becoming her sister-in-law if she were to marry Kazuhito, feels conflicted. Suspicions surrounding Madoka deepen when they realize she used Natsuno's book to lure Kazuhito, making Natsuno consider her a potential suspect for the slasher. Though Kazuhito disagrees, he agrees to help Natsuno investigate further. The next day, they search for Madoka near Sumiya Hall but fail to locate her. They encounter Suzume, who informs them that the slasher has struck again, prompting Natsuno to degrade her, much to Suzume's enjoyment. Suzume, overjoyed, falls to her knees as Natsuno continues berating her for providing information on the slasher. Suzume also shares details about a girl seen in the park the previous night, cutting up Akiyama's books and crying. The girl's description, particularly her short hair, fits Madoka perfectly. Kazuhito, now worried, visits the park with Natsuno, where they find scraps of burnt paper on the ground. Suddenly, Madoka appears, overjoyed to see Kazuhito again. Natsuno tells her that the brother she's referring to is actually a dog, leading to a heated argument. Madoka confirms that she destroyed the books the night before to lure her brother. In response, Natsuno throws a smoke bomb and vanishes with Kazuhito, returning to her apartment. Back at the apartment, Natsuno tells Kazuhito that she believes Madoka is the slasher. She suspects that Madoka felt Akiyama Shinobu's books were stealing her brother away, and blamed the books for his death, thinking they were the reason he stayed in Tokyo. Natsuno also suggests that Madoka may have become mentally unstable after Kazuhito's death, leading her to lose control and lash out at the books she blames. Hearing this, Kazuhito realizes he's been too afraid to confront how his family feels about his death. However, he remains convinced that Madoka isn't the slasher and vows to stop her if she is. He asks for Natsuno's help, expressing his trust and respect for her. Natsuno assures him that she's ready to do whatever it takes to assist him. Suddenly, Madoka crashes through the window and grabs Kazuhito. Natsuno reveals that she placed a tracking device on Kazuhito to locate him. She then discloses that she is actually Akiyama Shinobu, the author that Madoka despises. Natsuno explains that she witnessed Kazuhito's death, where he died protecting her from a robber's attack. Despite Madoka's reluctance to listen, Natsuno tells her that Kazuhito would be unhappy with her actions. Although Madoka realizes Natsuno is right, she avoids confronting her feelings and escapes by jumping out of the window and stealing the dog. Upon landing, Madoka admits to Kazuhito that she never truly believed the dog was him. After his death, she searched his neighborhood in Tokyo, hoping to find him. She set a trap using one of Kazuhito's favorite books, thinking only her brother would fall for it. Feeling like a terrible sister, Madoka cries, guilt-ridden that she disappointed and failed her dead brother. However, Kazuhito sees her as the best sister in the world, but he has no way to communicate this to her. Suddenly, Natsuno arrives, revealing that she also used a tracking device on Kazuhito. Preparing to fight, Madoka pulls out a strange electric knife called Tumor, which she bought through mail order, as she always cooked for Kazuhito with that particular knife. Kazuhito was surprised he hadn't seen it before. Natsuno then reveals her pair of scissors, and the two engage in a battle, initially appearing equally matched. However, Madoka activates her genocide mode, transforming her knife into a chainsaw. Madoka's weapon becomes more powerful, but Natsuno manages to dodge all her attacks. Eventually, Madoka's chainsaw gets stuck in a tree, allowing Natsuno to cut off the blades. Madoka then activates Destroy mode, turning the tuna eater into a cannon. When she fires the strange cannon at Natsuno, Natsuno skillfully cuts the bullet in half, causing it to explode behind her. Unable to believe her eyes, Madoka drops to her knees in defeat. After the fight, Natsuno and Madoka begin to get along and have a more normal conversation. Madoka confesses that she cut up Natsuno's books because Kazuhito warned her against selling them to bookstores, as it deprives the author of royalties. When Natsuno questions Madoka about her involvement in the slasher incidents, Madoka denies any connection. Later, Kazuhito sees Suzuma outside the apartment building and suspects that much of the information about the slasher came from Suzuna herself, speculating that she may have paid people to lie to them. He believes her motive was to pull him out of his slump by putting him in a dangerous situation. Suzuma admits the truth when confronted by Kazuhito and expresses her willingness to do anything for the sake of Natsuno and her books. However, Kazuhito warns her not to interfere with Natsuno's writing process. Suzuma sees how much connection and bond Natsuno and Kazuhito have built, and in amusement, she wonders what kind of story Natsuno would write if the dog were to die. She leaves, claiming Kazuhito has no proof of her involvement in the slasher incident. But Natsuno overhears the entire conversation and exposes Suzuna's lies. Natsuno reveals that she had already overcome her slump on her own earlier, unrelated to the incident Suzuna made up. Natsuno warns her that she'll be kind if Suzuma refrains from interfering, which horrifies Suzuna. The following day, Natsuno meets Madoka just before she boards her train to return home. In their conversation, Natsuno agrees to let Madoka call her dog Kazuhito, making Madoka happy.